Hey friends, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. Today I'm going to dive into soil testing. It is something I talk about a lot. Getting a soil test, taking it to your local extension office. So I'm going to kind of dive in deeper to that today, and we've been getting a lot of questions on that. This is the time of year that I really start emphasizing cleaning out the winter garden beds, amending for the spring garden and the summer garden. So I'm going to really talk through what that looks like. What is a soil test when you take it to an extension office? What's the benefits of doing that? Why we do it, and why you really should be doing it too. So let's dive in. So first of all, let's just talk about what does it do. When I talk about getting a soil test, which I've got my baggies, we're going to mark this and head out into the garden in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of cover some of the basics first. What a soil test is you collect soil, and we'll dive into, like I said, how to do all that, but it just determines the health and the fertility of your soil. It also will go into details on, what your soil is high in, what your soil is low in, and it really allows you the ability to just cater to your soil's needs, which is really important, especially for me. We were growing for profit for several seasons and selling all of our produce, and so making sure I kind of have max production on my crop and I don't have something failing just due to, it's either too high or too low in something, whether that be acidity or whether that be nitrogen or whatever it may be. When you're doing this professionally, and even if you're just a home gardener, like really wanting to hone in and know the soil health, I feel like this can benefit you tremendously, because you're not doing all these things to your soil that it doesn't need. You can literally break that down. It's really cool. Whenever we get our test results back from our extension office, I will do another follow-up video on this and explaining what all of it is, because that is another thing. It can be kind of overwhelming reading your test results, but it really just kind of breaks it all down. And so that is the reason why we do this, is just to cater to each of our soil's own set of specific needs. That way we're not over adding something or under adding something. It just really sets us up for a really successful garden season. I know for me personally, there were several seasons where I just added things without knowing. It was just kind of like this blind game of, I don't know, I'll just always add in nitrogen. And I felt like every year I kept adding in nitrogen, and that's actually not good. Like there is a thing as too much nitrogen, as many of us know that now, but your plants may look well on the outside. When there's high nitrogen, they're these lush, beautiful green plants, and they just think, oh, this is amazing. But then you realize that too much nitrogen causes your plants to be green and lush. It really kind of takes a while for them to flower and set fruit. So while I thought I was doing a good thing by adding in, nitrogen every single year, my plants looked green, I realized that it actually stunted them, and they actually took a lot longer to set their fruit. And I just learned through that, catering to my own, soil's needs. All right, so what you do when you get a soil test, you will take this to your local extension office. Most counties have a local extension office. You can call them and ask them what the requirements are for your soil testing. For mine, they just ask you to put soil in like a baggie, and you're going to want to get several samples of your soil. So we're going to head out into the garden bed, but I've got 3 baggies for my large garden bed, and I will take samples from the front, the middle, and the end of the bed. And then my smaller bed, I'm going to take 2 samples. I'm going to make sure that I have soil from the right side and the left side. And what's really important here is just making sure that you get enough. So always provide with more than not enough, because if it's not enough to do their analysis and their sample, then they're just going to send it back to you and tell you, hey, I actually need more soil. So I have found that for me and where I live, I do encourage you to call your local extension office, ask them if like a sandwich baggie is good enough, and just kind of fill out. That way you're not wasting your time driving there. I do a couple of these depending on the size of my bed. So I've got my baggies, I've got my marker. Let's head out into the garden and let's collect some soil. So for many years, soil intimidated me, and it was really just lack of not knowing on my end. I just didn't realize how many intricate moving parts there are to soils. I didn't realize all the microorganisms happening in the soil, and you could tell. I mean, my garden reflected my lack of soil knowledge. Now, as I have been growing for more years and become a bit more experienced, I realized that really, until I get my soil right, nothing's gonna be right. And I know that that may make sense to a lot of you guys. You would think, oh yeah, well obviously if your soil's not right, nothing's right. But for many years I just didn't realize how huge that was. I knew that when I had built my garden beds that I needed to have good soil. I knew if I grew in ground, I needed to have good soil. I didn't realize how important it was that what I amended my beds with was really going to make or break my season. And so I do encourage you guys, if maybe you've had that mentality or that mindset of just not putting a huge emphasis on your soil, I encourage you to do that. There's a lot of really good research out there. There's a lot of really good like courses and classes you can take on that. I've taken several soil management classes and I just feel like I'm better because of it. Like my garden is better because of it. So that's why I really want to talk to you guys about this. Just emphasizing on your soil, especially if you're having issues in your garden. More than likely it is a direct line from something lacking or too much of something in your soil. So now that I have my sandwich baggies out here, I'm in my first garden bed, so it's my long one that I'm gonna do here today. I'm actually just gonna write on my marker today's date. I'm gonna put long bed, left side. So I just have that written. I've got the date, I have what bed it is, and then what side. And that's typically what I'll do is I'll divvy it out into sections. So I have, you know, my spade here, and I'm just gonna get a scoop from maybe this part of the front section, some over there, and wherever I've corded it off, I'll probably get 4 scoops of each corner in this section, put it in the baggie, then I'll move on into the center, and then I'll move on to the end. Encourage you guys too, when you're getting these samples, make sure that your soil's not just clumped and compacted. That is something that our extension office told us was really important. It just makes their job easier. So if you do have a bunch of big clumps, I'd recommend maybe putting it in a bucket and just maybe taking your spade or something and just kind of, you know, breaking it down a bit. That way it's easier. All right, let's go grab the last sample out of my big bed. Now this is where I'm going to be planting my flowers. That's also really important depending on what you're planting in here. You know, you can figure out the analysis that comes from your soil sample and then figure out what it is you're growing in that bed and what it loves. So it just really allows you the ability to cater to your plants really, really well. Okay, so I got 3 bags from my long bed that is 18, that's like 30 something foot long. So you will determine how many bags you need based off of how big your bed is. Most of my beds that are 16 foot long or whatever, I'm just gonna do 2. That bed in particular is really long, so I'm just making sure I have enough soil to get a good, you know, idea of across the platform, across the entire bed of what all it needs. Now, I would encourage you to do a soil test before each new season. So I plant, you know, a lot for my spring and summer garden, so I would want to do one in the winter before that spring and summer planting, and then I would want to do one at the end of the summer for, you know, once I've taken out my summer plants for the fall and the winter. Now this is going to depend if you do not, you know, grow in certain seasons, and that's totally fine. You'll just kind of figure out when you're going to be planting, and I would recommend when you're getting ready to maybe add more soil, amend your bed for whatever the next season is you're planting. That's when I would think about getting your soil tested. Typically we allot at least 1 to 2 weeks for them to get the results back. A lot of times it doesn't take that long, but recently we have been told to give them a bit more time. So we're just gonna lean, you know, if it takes us 2 weeks to get these results back, I still have enough time to amend my beds, do everything I need to do before my spring planting, and be just fine. I really want to take a minute and talk to you guys too about the benefits of testing your soil often. I know when you think about this, and maybe you think about driving to your extension office and that's adding just another step on your to-do list, you're like, is it really worth it? And so I want to tell you guys just some practical tips and advice on why I think getting your soil tested regularly is worth the extra maybe chore that it might be. So first of all, you just gain an incredible amount of knowledge about your soil, what your soil health is, what your soil needs are, how to, you know, improve your soil. So what your soil needs is going to be totally different than what my soil needs. And by doing this test, you are able, like I said, just to cater to your specific soil needs, which is just going to improve your garden year, which is going to improve the health and the longevity of your plants that you're growing. So that is just a major benefit. It is also one of the first steps in knowing your soil fertility and how to manage that really well. You know, I have mentioned, you know, diving into all the microorganisms and the whole atmosphere that's going on, the whole ecosystem that's going on in your soil. The more you figure out, you know, the fertility of your soil and how to manage that well, again, it's just going to make things a lot more streamlined for you seasons down the road. By knowing exactly what your soil needs, you really avoid over fertilizing. Like I had mentioned with that nitrogen, I know a lot of people, that's just one of the first things they go to. Well, you could actually be adding too much nitrogen in. You could be adding too much of a fertilizer that your soil doesn't actually need, and it can be having a negative reaction on your plants and your soil. So by knowing exactly, you know, everything your soil needs, you just really avoid that, you know, need to over fertilize. By not over fertilizing, you also avoid soil degradation. You avoid like erosions in your soil. You avoid adding things in that aren't needed, and you're just overall maintaining and creating a really healthy atmosphere for your soil that then you're going to plant your plants into, and they're going to thrive. And this is the time of year, guys, that I just really encourage you to put an emphasis on this. I know a lot of you guys may be growing a garden for the first time this spring, and I am so happy for you. And you want to set yourself up to feel good, you know, to grow something and have that yes I did it moment. I feel like every one of us deserves to have that moment in gardening. And so I feel like if you really just kind of take these few steps and really figure out your soil and what your soil needs are, you're going to set yourself up to have that really successful gardening year, which is going to encourage you, and it's going to make you want to continue to grow and continue to plant new things and try new things. And so I'm a huge proponent of setting yourself up to have a really successful season. I personally believe that knowing what your soil needs and how to amend them properly for their specific needs will determine a good gardening year and a bad gardening year. So when we get our test results in, I will do a follow-up video to this. We will talk about everything. I'll show you guys how to read your soil test. They will be a bit different, but I will print off some that are similar and a bit different than mine, and just really help you guys dive in and understand. I remember whenever we got our soil test back, I looked at Nathan and I was like, what does all this mean? I was so confused. I didn't know where to start. So it's one thing to get your soil tested, then it's a whole nother ball field to try to understand what that means. So I'm just gonna kind of help you guys break that down, make it a bit easier to understand, and just really help you guys set up your spring garden for major success. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll talk to you soon.